In fact, that's where we're going to start off for this morning here on the SA Morning. President Ramaphosa has lifted officially the national state of disaster. This after South Africa had been in a state of disaster for over 740 days. All regulations made in terms of the Disaster Management Act were done away with at midnight last night. The president outlining some developments as well in South Africa's response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet has decided to terminate the national state of disaster with effect from midnight tonight. The Disaster Management Act provides that certain elements of the regulations may remain in place for a limited period for post-disaster recovery and rehabilitation. Accordingly, certain transitional provisions will remain in place for a period of 30 days after the termination of the national state of disaster to ensure essential public health precautions and other necessary services are not interrupted while the new regulations in terms of the National Health Act come into effect. What this means is that all regulations and directions made in terms of the Disaster Management Act following the declaration of the national state of disaster in response to COVID-19 are repealed, meaning done away with effect from midnight tonight, with the exception of a few transitional measures. These transitional measures, which will automatically lapse after 30 days, are the following. Firstly, we will still be required to wear a face mask in an indoor public space. This is necessary to prevent transmission in high-risk places, especially while many people remain unvaccinated. A mask is not required when outdoors. Secondly, the existing restrictions on gatherings will continue as a transitional measure. This means that both indoor and outdoor venues can take up to 50% of their capacity without any maximum limit, provided that proof of vaccination or a COVID test not older than 72 hours is required for entrance to the venue.
But Ramaphosa did remind everyone the pandemic is not yet over and South Africa needs to keep getting vaccinated. He urged the public to continue being cautious as well. He says the end of the state of disaster is a massive milestone in the fight against COVID-19, but it does not mean it's now time for complacency.
Importantly, by ending the national state of disaster, we are each taking more individual responsibility for protecting our health and the health of others. Our greatest responsibility is to make sure that we are vaccinated against COVID-19 and to encourage others to get vaccinated. Vaccination is still our best defense against COVID-19. Vaccination is also the best weapon we have to reduce the chances of future waves of infection that overwhelm our health facilities and that may require that we once more declare a state of disaster. We must, however, remain cautious and ever vigilant. We have learned that this virus is unpredictable and that the situation can change rapidly.
Well, in case you missed that family meeting last night, you're probably wondering about travel restrictions. Well, there are still strict travel restrictions in place. Ramaphosa is saying international travelers will not be allowed into our country unless they provide proof of vaccination or at least a negative PCR test not older than 3 days.
The existing provisions with respect to international travel remain in place. This means that travelers entering South Africa will need to show proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test not older than 72 hours. If a traveler does not submit a vaccine certificate or proof of a negative COVID-19 test, they will be required to do an antigen test on arrival. If they test positive for COVID-19, they will need to isolate for 10 days.
Well, the end of the over 2-year lockdown has been welcomed, of course, by many. And while a return to normality is a relief for most, scientists are cautioning over the risks of attending mass indoor and, of course, what we called super spreader events.
No, I actually support the caution around gatherings. I think that we need to regulate it, especially because we may have a fifth wave that we still need to manage. Right now, in the state that we are with low cases, it's easy to say that, oh, we can do away with it. But our vaccinations are still low. And, when we do have a disaster, there will be an expectation that we need to have measures to manage it. Personally, I think that we need to maintain the management of gatherings and to actually think about how to position ourselves even beyond the pandemic to make sure that we don't overcrowd our spaces in order to prevent the spread of any respiratory infection.
So, state of disaster is now ended, but of course we have to still keep a close eye on the COVID-19 numbers coming in from the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. Here's how we look this morning, South Africa. 685 new cases have been recorded in the last 24 hours.
That's right, and Gauteng continues to lead in infections with 315 cases. It's then followed by the Western Cape with 137 new infections.
KZN, they have 122. The remaining provinces all reporting well under 100 cases. Limpopo only sitting on 3 cases at the moment. Sadly, 2 people have died due to COVID-19 in the last 24 to 48 hours.
And over 12,000 tests were also conducted with a 5.4% positivity rate.